So when saying this, does the Quran use a leftist language, or is this debate a recent debate? Does the Quran have a leftist ideology, language, rhetoric and discourse, or is it rightist? You shall not kill, it is religion. So what punishment will we give to a murderer who kills? This is Sharia, you shall not steal, 1,000. What punishment will you apply to a man who steals? Sharia. How many times did the word Sharia appear in the books of the ulema in the first centuries, and how many times in the following centuries? The word Sharia appears very rarely in the first centuries. The word begins to be cited more in the following centuries. Religion has existed since the beginning. Religion, 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 religion in all books. But then the word Sharia begins to be mentioned more frequently throughout the geographies. We understand that people produce legal data in the areas they need, and this is called Sharia.
Hello everyone from Istanbul School. Dear viewers, today we will talk about the relationship between religion and Sharia. Our guest is Prof. Dr. Şaban Ali Düzgün. Hello teacher, how are you?
Hello, thank you. You?
Thank you very much.
May God grant you goodness.
Thank you. Hoja, we would like to talk about the relationship between religion and Sharia. You actually have a title that you mentioned in your book, Social Theology in the 90s. You say that religion is Mecca and Sharia is Medina. We would actually like to ask within the framework of this title, because the relationship between religion and Sharia is a topic of discussion right now. It is not a new debate, obviously. It is an issue that has been going on since time immemorial. How do you look at this? How would you evaluate it?
This new popular culture has opened a discussion. We have evolved into a slogan brought about by Turkey's political and ideological polarization. In other words, the issue has moved beyond the grounds where it should be very academic. Therefore, historically, how the words Sharia and religion are used by both the ulema and are mentioned in the Quran, both words are mentioned. What are their contexts and relationships? This requires a large literature, and in history the Hanafis, Imami Azam Abu Hanifa, and the subsequent ulema who grew, nourished and ensured the flow of that vein, and especially Imami Haturi among them, saw religion and Sharia as two separate realities, and this is what the Quran created for each society, for each nation. We see in the Hanafi and Maturidi traditions that where there is difference, whether in worship or law, Sharia is emphasized. Where there is difference, sameness, unity is emphasized, religion is emphasized. Where there is immutability, stability, religion is emphasized. Where there is differentiation, Sharia is emphasized, a kind of law is emphasized. This is also reflected in the distinction Arnold Toynbee made between Northern Islam and Southern Islam, because what you call Sharia is ultimately the practices of a culture, a geography. If these practices existed before religion, and religion came and legitimized those practices and made them applicable to everyone. If it is determined as a code, here we will encounter secondary and tertiary problems such as whether different geographies adopt that code, apply it or not, or whether it is suitable for their own geography. Why does Sharia Southern Islam, let's say the Hejaz region, namely the Arab Arnold Toynbee, call the understanding of Islam formed on the line of Saudi Arabia and Cairo Southern Islam? There is a founding mind here, it establishes it from above, and everyone is aligned according to it. All geographies are aligned according to it. Now, if this founding mind tries to apply the Sharia established in the Hejaz region in Central Asia, what we mean by Sharia there is law. If you try to apply it in Central Asia or any geography of the 21st century, then the principle of difference is the essence in Sharia. This time it will be overshadowed. Therefore, this line is not just an academic discussion of Sharia and religion, but a cultural difference, that is, a culture that meets the needs of different nations, Turks, Iranians, Indonesians, Malaysians, Bosnians, Egyptians, each of which is expected from their own geography. This production regulates economic relations. establishes a legal system that you know, or establishes a political system. There are differences in all of these. Naturally, there are differences. Therefore, wherever there is this difference, it will show itself in a public area, and the public area is different everywhere. This is called Sharia, but Maturidi did not only associate this Sharia with law, he also included worship. What he called worship is prayer in Christians, Jews, and Muslims, but different from each other. There is fasting, but different from each other. What was our principle? In the areas where there is difference, he called the areas where there is change, the Hanafi Maturidi tradition Sharia area. This change is also seen in worship. It is also seen in legal practices. The area he calls religion is in no way from the first prophet to the last prophet. This means that now there are differences. Look at the differences. The race that Prophet Moses descended from is different from the race he came from. The language he speaks is different. The Arabs, that is, the revelation that came to the Prophet Muhammad, had a different race, a different language. The race that came to Prophet Jesus had a different race, a different language. There are racial and linguistic differences even among prophets. In other words, there are differences based on ethnicity and language, but they are all prophets. Look, the language is different, the ethnic basis is different, but the constant that we define as the superstructure that rises above all these differences is religion, where everyone's feet are placed. It does not change.
In other words, while religion is more comprehensive and has a higher place, Sharia is like a framework seen from the branches it is divided into.
Let's say it like this, it's more understandable. For example, you shall not kill is religion. So what punishment will we give to a murderer who kills? This is Sharia. You shall not steal is religion. What punishment will you apply to a man who steals? Sharia. Now we see the part where there are differences. Even today there are differences, but you shall not steal is religion. Therefore religion equals morality, because there is no change in moral principles. Now, if we come to the title, why did we use the title Religion is Mecca, Sharia is Medina in the book of social theology? Why religion? It is Mecca. So when we say religion, what comes to mind in the Meccan period? What comes to mind when we say Sharia is the middle? Let's say this without making it too sophisticated and complicated. The Meccan period is a world built around the word freedom, a world framed. There is no public space in Mecca. There is the word freedom in Mecca. In Medina there is a transition to the public space and there is the word justice. In other words, Mecca is built around the word freedom, Medina is built around the word justice where there is a public space. Then we need to explain the word freedom. I mean, why is there freedom in Mecca? This freedom that is not free can be freedom in the economic sense. We call this property. The Quran, that is property. People will be free to own property. This means that I have no property, I have no possessions. I say property in the sense we use in Turkish, because in the Quran the word property is used as an economic word. The word property is used as a political word. The word mulk is not only used in Turkish. There is a verse word like this: what is in the heavens, what is on the earth, what is between them, and what is in the heart of the earth, all belong to Allah. Now this belonging belongs to Him both in the sense of property. In other words, if there is a sovereign, someone who will claim sovereignty over these, if there is a political power, if there is an empire, a kingdom, they should know that the Meccan period was organized around the word freedom. Today, when we say freedom, the individual who comes to our mind is the individual who will oppress him. Freedom from sources of authority. This is what we call negative freedom, or let's say it is defined as negative freedom. What kind of impulses does a person have within their impulses? Sexuality is an impulse. The desire to eat and drink is an impulse. Now, the freedom of people to do these things, namely sexual freedom, freedom to eat and drink what they want, also equates people with beings other than us who are their animals. Since it equates, this freedom is referred to as negative freedoms, since we have not yet transferred to the human authority. This is how the economy, neoliberal economy, is one of the important names. Hayek positions it. Neoliberalism, freedoms are like this here. However, people need to move on to the positive freedoms part. There is also a divine side inside people. In other words, there is an animal side and a human side inside people. Your human side is related to your art, culture, religion, in other words, the superstructure. And when you realize them, you can really be free. In other words, freedom can be, I do what I want. No, okay, let me check that. There is a side within me that is human and divine, and it is also that mind in us. You may say, let my instincts and impulses be controlled. I do not want to go beyond this discussion. I'm just saying this is a background and a data, negative and positive freedoms, but here in the Meccan period, freedom is only in the sense of a slave being free from his master. In a narrow sense, this is negative freedom. It's like setting an animal free, because at the beginning, the enslavement of a human being is already a disaster. After the natural situation was disrupted, when we restored that disruption to its natural state, we created freedom. No, disrupting it was already against nature. What is positive freedom? Positive freedom is a freedom that means that people living in the same society can benefit from whatever that society produces, whatever is good, prosperity, happiness. Now, for example, there's a very striking claim in the Quran, and what this verse really means is still being debated. In other words, is the Quran using a leftist language when it says this, or is this debate a recent debate? The Quran is a leftist ideology. Does it have its language, rhetoric, discourse, or is it right-wing? When it says the emphasis it puts on the concept of property, that is, you have the right to property and property is inviolable, it means that religion produces a right-wing discourse and defends it. But on the other hand, it says that people do not give what they have to those who are lower than them, because they fear that they will be equal. Well, this is what left-wing rhetoric says. Then we need to look at it like this. In other words, when I look at the verses of the Quran, I always try to find the possibility of a third way. In other words, we need to stay away from a reductionist approach by saying that when the left says freedom, it is a left-wing discourse, and when it says property, it is a right-wing discourse. That will be the property of these people. The Quran mentions giving zakat, but before that they work to give zakat. There is a statement by the perpetrator of the zakat. It is not that they give zakat. They strive to be in a position to give zakat. This means this. You will have property, you will have wealth, you will earn money that you can give to someone else. In other words, the Quran encourages people to be wealthy, to have property, to own property. So what is the incentive? The encouragement is this. For those who are left behind from what you have, the Holy Quran says, Mustah's pardon, because they did not stay below knowingly and willingly. In some way, the family they were born into, the geography they were born into made them weak.
Professor, where does morality fall in this discussion of religion and Sharia? Because we say religion is universal and morality is also universal. How should we establish the relationship between these two?
That's a very good question. Why? Friends who bring up the discussions of religion and Sharia, we see that they actually miss the most moral, universal, and most appropriate ground for human relations in both religion and Sharia. Ultimately, religion is morality, what you call Sharia. In other words, if it is justice, if it is the search for law, If a law that is devoid of justice, is already problematic and troublesome in terms of the consequences it will cause, if the main theme, the main ground that organizes justice and its derivatives, in other words, everything related to society, is morality, then the place where religion and Sharia will come and settle, find growth and settle, is that moral ground. That is why we equate morality with reason and rationality. And we say that religion is equal to morality and reason. In other words, when we say this, it is a view that I agree with, and it is the view of Maturi. He says that religion is rational, Sharia is not rational. Because, for example, he counted the worships within the Sharia. There is no rational aspect of the obligatory evening prayer being 3 rakats instead of 4 rakats. This is a duty, it is accepted. You kiss it, put it on your head, do it, okay. But morality is not like that. Therefore, the justification of religion, the justification of morality, is that you tell me to do this, why I will do that. But when you do this, you will be happy. When you do this, you will establish a fair system. Okay, I understand, he says. So let me answer very briefly. If the debate between religion and Sharia is discussed without putting the moral element there, we will enter into a very sterile debate. The main ground that feeds both is the moral ground.
This was a very good definition. Aside from the moral dimension, this debate also has a political ideological dimension. How do you see this? What do you think is the political ideological dimension of the relationship between the Sharia and religious debates in Turkey?
Now, when you include the Arab world, Asia, and the entire Muslim geography in these discussions, you will see that what is written and drawn about Sharia is really quite disconnected and different from each other. In other words, the answer to the question of whether there is a distinction between religion and Sharia in the Middle East is definitely not. What you call religion is Sharia, what you call Sharia is religion. In Turkey, we are used to this. As I said, the Hanafi Maturidi tradition taught us that what we call Sharia is legal codes, and it is expected from you to produce it according to your needs. Religion gives you the basic abilities to produce that Sharia, that law. It guides you and equips you with a mind that you can predict what results you will reach, so the divine will ultimately determine the Sharia, and you set the legal norms for yourself. Even in the first 100 articles of the Masel, when people are discussing, they say the following. It is undeniable that Esma, that is, the change of time, the change of judgments and judgments with imagination. Which judgments are you changing? Are you changing the judgments of morality? Are you changing the judgments of reason? Are you changing the judgments of religion? No. There is something they agree on. The judgments change. Which judgments? The answer is the judgments of Sharia. Then you understand who is making this change. There is a source that feeds from Abdullah ibn Masud, Hazreti Omar, Imam-i-Azam. This source that we call Eli Ray is a vein that takes the human initiative that we call ijtihad into consideration and shows respect for it. And this vein places the responsibility of the person to perform the code, application, and transactions that we call Sharia on the shoulders of the person. The guiding basic principles are religious, rational. We also put the divine there. Now, is such a distinction between Sharia and religion that you mentioned being discussed in Turkey, considering this fine distinction that we made? No, the academy, the theology community knows what they are discussing. In the discussion of whether there is a distinction between religion and Sharia or not. However, this issue is being discussed within an ideological framework. So when you hear this sentence, damn the Sharia sentence, those who say this do not say that I am referring to the law, I am referring to the law, I am not referring to religion itself, I am making a distinction, etc. There is a counterstance there. That counterstance is an initiative that rejects religion, Sharia, and everything based on Islam without recognizing them. Unfortunately, it is an initiative that defines them without recognizing them. It defines them without recognizing them. We are very used to this in Turkey. The segments that mutually exclude each other have not yet been able to stop feeding on each other. Therefore, they are in a position to stone each other. This is the case in Turkey, where the Sharia debate, its equivalent in secular pens, is equalized with religion there, and the two are placed in a common bowl, and its mouth is sealed. Let's put a responsibility on people's shoulders by constantly giving examples of the ijtihads of Hazrat Omar, which opened up a field of initiative for people, of the distinction we made between religion and Sharia. And let's show that law is not a sealed, frozen, blessed structure. In other words, what I mean by sealing is that you take a rule that people set for their own geography 1,000 years ago, and you sanctify it. You seal it like this. This means that you imprison it in time. After that, it will never be uncovered again forever. Just think, what will humanity be like in 100 years? But religious minds will still say that that blessed law from 1,000 years ago is valid. They will take these Muslim peoples out of history. It is a way to skids there. It is nothing else. Therefore, if you look at the ulama people who give importance to reason, opinion, that is, human ideas and thoughts, remember Abdullah bin Masud, Hazrat Omar, Imam-e-Azam, you see that they follow that vein very seriously, because if there is a problem, it is your problem. It is not the problem of a person 1,000 years ago, and the subtlety and sophisticated thought structure that you will show in solving it may not be found in that person. What will you do? Will you leave the problem unresolved? No. Therefore, separating that area, the area of Sharia, from the basic structure of religion is a way of facilitating a life that has become a tradition.
Yes, Hoja, as you said here, the debate between religion and Sharia is currently on the agenda, and unfortunately the main problem stems from keeping these two as one. In general, those who are against Sharia are actually against religion. Unfortunately, we come across discourses such as, "Don't you know your religion?" to people who don't know Sharia, and "Don't you know your religion?" to those who are against Sharia. But here you have differentiated them on a basic ground. You have dealt with them in moral and ideological political dimensions. It was a good definition. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Maybe one last thing is worth saying. Now, some countries that claim to be governed by Islam and have a theocratic structure are trying to show the public that they are practicing religion and fulfilling the commands of Allah by doing some of the jurisprudential and legal practices that are mentioned in the Quran or that are prominent in our culture. So we need to be vigilant here too. You cut off the hands of 3, 5 rules of religion in public for show, and then you do all kinds of immorality behind the curtains. In other words, it is a pity that religion, Sharia, and those words are abused so much. Let me say one last thing. In the 90s or 2000s, I don't remember exactly, Islam magazine published a Sharia file. There I had translated a book by a man named Wilfred Cantwell Smith. Something like this was inferred there. How many times did the word Sharia appear in the books of the ulama in the first centuries? And how many times did it appear in the following centuries? The word Sharia appears very rarely in the first centuries. It is mentioned once or twice in a whole book. In the following centuries, the word begins to be cited more. Gradually, legally, because as geography grows, people's needs increase, they begin to develop legal norms, and they begin to call the legal norm, they develop Sharia. However, religion has been there since the beginning. In all the books, religion, 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 religion. But then, as geographies grow, the word Sharia begins to be mentioned more frequently. We understand that people produce legal data in the field they need and call it Sharia.
and they are trying to strengthen it by basing it on religion.
So naturally, if what you call religion gives universal principles, for example, human life is sacred, untouchable, whoever kills an innocent person is as if he has killed all of humanity. Now, this is what religion says. The person who establishes law, Sharia, human life is innocent. You have this once, this person, whether you are Muslim or non-Muslim, life is inviolable. This has to be put as the main principle of Sharia and law. As I said, religion, which Sharia is based on, is the main ground on which Sharia will grow. Morality, the moral ground, is the main ground on which Sharia will grow. The main ground is religion, morality, reason. Your effort to produce a legal norm in accordance with this is also understandable. What we are saying is this. The law produced 1,000 years ago was produced with an effort to meet the needs of that time. It is respectable. But if you look at it from today's perspective, when you say it does not meet the needs, brother, then you will say that you should develop a law that meets the needs. Okay, the name of this is ijtihad. The discussion of whether this door has been closed or not is a primitive discussion. As long as the needs continue, that door is open. Whether or not you show your competence and make an appeal is your problem. Appeal is not the problem of the institutions. It is not the problem of religion or morality. Let's express this on this occasion.
Okay, thank you very much, teacher. You have opened a third door to these religious and Sharia discussions and added the subject of morality. You have perhaps brought the discussion to a dimension where it can be evaluated from different perspectives. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, today we tried to address the religion and Sharia debate in all its dimensions. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.